I've always thought of history as something distant. Just names in textbooks, old photographs of strangers, events so far removed from me that they may as well have been fiction. But sometimes history comes clawing out of the past, not politely through books, but violently, like a scream echoing across the centuries. That's what happened the first time I stumbled on the story of the Donner Party. At first, it seemed like just another pioneer story. Brave settlers heading west across the American wilderness. But as I dug deeper, I realized this was not a tale of triumph. This was a descent into madness, hunger, and desperation. It began in 1846, when nearly 90 men, women, and children packed up their lives and left Illinois, heading west in a wagon train toward California. The dream was simple: fertile land, golden opportunities, a new life. But what awaited them was not a new beginning. It was a nightmare that would leave their names forever stained with whispers of cannibalism, death, and betrayal. History likes to present itself neatly, with beginnings, middles, and ends. But when you look closely at the Donner Party, it feels less like a story and more like a haunting. Every decision, every misstep, every delay dragged them deeper into the jaws of the Sierra Nevada winter. And by the time the snow stopped falling, nearly half of them would be dead.
Some tried hunting, but the mountains offered nothing. Snow buried every track, and the few animals that might have survived the storm were long gone. They trapped mice, gnawed on bones already scraped clean, and boiled leather straps in the hope that something in them might keep death at bay. But no amount of leather or mice could fill an empty belly. Soon the unthinkable began to stir in their minds. The first deaths came naturally: starvation, disease, exhaustion. The bodies were buried under snow, at least at first. But as more died and the hunger clawed deeper, the survivors began to look at the dead not as loved ones, but as the only food left. They resisted at first. Families clung to their humanity, hoping for rescue, praying for deliverance. But prayers froze in the bitter air, and no help came. In the end, desperation stripped away morality. The first cut into human flesh was not a moment of triumph, but of shame. And yet, once the line was crossed, survival demanded it again and again. Flesh was boiled, roasted, consumed in silence. Mothers fed children with the bodies of neighbors. Friends became food. And each act left scars far deeper than hunger ever could. The Donner Party had entered a nightmare, one where the only way to live was to feast on the dead. By late December, the survivors knew they couldn't all just sit and wait. If they stayed, the mountains would become their graves. Rescue had to be sought, no matter the risk. A group of 15 men and women volunteered to leave camp and attempt the impossible, crossing the Sierra Nevada on foot to find help. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope, a grim name that captured both their desperation and their courage. They fashioned crude snowshoes from oxen hides and wood, strapped meager rations to their backs, and set off into the endless white. At first, they moved with determination, but the mountains showed them no mercy. The snow was deep, the cold unrelenting, and the wind cut like knives. One by one, exhaustion and frostbite set in. Their rations ran out, and the forest gave nothing. Hunger once again stalked them like a predator. Death soon followed. When the first members of the Forlorn Hope collapsed, the others faced the same dreadful choice as those back at camp: starve or feed. They chose to feed. The bodies of their companions became the only thing keeping the rest alive. Flesh carved from the dead was shared in silence, a macabre communion under the frozen sky. Some went mad from the horror. Others wept with every bite, but still they pushed on, driven by the faint hope of saving the others. After more than 30 days in the wilderness, the survivors of the Forlorn Hope stumbled into settlements on the western side of the mountains.
When they told their story, Californians were horrified. A rescue party was organized at once. But even then, the snow was so deep that it would take multiple expeditions and months of struggle to reach the camps. For those still waiting at Donner Lake, salvation was coming, but not soon enough to save them all. It wasn't until mid-February of 1847, nearly 4 months after the Donner Party had been trapped, that the first rescue team finally broke through the mountains and reached the camps. What they found was something out of a nightmare. The cabins were buried in snowdrifts, smoke barely rising from the chimneys. Inside, the rescuers discovered gaunt, hollow-eyed survivors who looked more like skeletons than human beings. Children hid under blankets, too weak to move. The smell of decay clung to the air. At first, the rescuers thought the survivors had simply starved. But then they noticed the bones. They were cracked open, marrow sucked out. Pieces of flesh were missing from limbs. Cooking pots showed signs of boiling that had nothing to do with animal meat. The truth became undeniable. The Donner Party had survived by eating the dead. Some survivors admitted it in shame. Others denied it until their dying day. But the evidence was everywhere. Rescue would not be quick or simple. The survivors were too weak to travel, and the snow too deep to move them all at once. Over the next 2 months, 4 separate relief parties came to carry survivors down the mountains. Each time they found fewer left alive, and each time they found more proof of cannibalism.